What if the collapse of an empire isn't a sudden fall, but a slow, predictable process that happens in 4 stages? What if every great civilization, from Rome to Britain, and now possibly America, follows the same pattern? And what if we're already in the final act right now, without even realizing it? This isn't just about history. This is about a cycle that repeats, again and again, regardless of geography, culture, or leadership. The same sequence of rise, overreach, and decline has unfolded for millennia. It's not random. It's not bad luck. It's a formula. And today, we're going to trace that formula from the Roman Empire, through the British Empire, to the modern-day United States. The goal isn't to predict doom, but to understand the signs, because empires don't fall overnight. They erode from within. To understand how empires fall, we first need to understand how they rise. Most of them begin with crisis, chaos, war, or a vacuum of power. Rome, for example, rose from centuries of internal tribal conflict and external threats. The early republic wasn't built in stability, but in blood and uncertainty. Out of that chaos emerged a system that valued discipline, military service, and civic duty. The Roman legions, backed by infrastructure like roads and aqueducts, became the spine of a rapidly expanding empire. The British Empire followed a different path, driven by exploration and commerce. At first, it was a trading nation, building naval power to protect routes and cargo. Over time, that trade expanded into colonization, and the colonies fed wealth back into the imperial core. Like Rome, Britain developed systems to manage its growth: bureaucracy, legal institutions, military logistics. America, too, began in crisis, born from revolution, tested by civil war, and galvanized by 2 world wars. Its strength came not just from military might, but from a potent combination of innovation, economic productivity, and the belief in an exceptional national destiny. The dollar became the world's reserve currency. American culture, tech, and finance penetrated every corner of the globe. So where do things go wrong? Here's the pattern. Stage 1 is the origins: hardship, struggle, a unifying cause. This stage creates cohesion. Stage 2 is the rise: expansion, stability, prosperity. But then comes stage 3, the breaking point. The moment where strength turns into overconfidence, and the empire begins to stretch beyond what it can control. And finally, stage 4 is the fallout. Not always a dramatic collapse, but a hollowing out from within. Institutions corroding, public trust decaying, and influence fading. Let's go back to Rome. After centuries of conquest, Rome in the 2nd century AD was the most powerful empire on Earth. But the very success of its expansion created new vulnerabilities. To sustain its vast territory, Rome had to raise taxes. The economy started to buckle under the weight of military spending and corruption. The government began debasing the currency, watering down the silver content of coins to fund its obligations. This led to inflation, which hurt ordinary citizens while enriching elites and administrators. As inequality widened, the middle class, the engine of Roman society, eroded. Political instability followed. Between 235 and 284 AD, Rome had over 25 emperors, most of whom were assassinated or killed in battle. Military loyalty shifted from the Senate to individual generals. The empire fractured, unable to reconcile its ambitions with its resources. Eventually, Rome split in 2, and by 476 AD, the Western Roman Empire fell. The British Empire reached its breaking point in a different way. By the late 19th century, Britain controlled over 25% of the world's population and landmass. But that global dominance came at a cost. The First World War drained the empire's resources. The Second World War finished the job. Britain emerged victorious but bankrupt, reliant on American loans, its economy in tatters. Post-war, nationalist movements in colonies intensified. India gained independence in 1947, setting off a domino effect. The Suez Crisis of 1956, a failed military intervention by Britain, France, and Israel, signaled to the world that Britain was no longer the dominant power. The empire collapsed not in a bang, but in a slow retreat. Today, the UK still wields cultural influence, but its role as a global hegemon is long gone. Which brings us to America. After the Cold War, the United States stood as the world's only superpower. The 1990s were a period of unchallenged dominance. But like Rome and Britain before it, America began to overreach. Military interventions in Iraq and Afghanistan cost trillions of dollars and failed to deliver lasting stability. Defense spending soared. Meanwhile, back home, infrastructure aged, healthcare costs exploded, and income inequality reached levels unseen since the Gilded Age. In 1971, the US abandoned the gold standard, allowing unlimited money printing. Since then, the national debt has climbed to over $33 trillion. The Federal Reserve's attempts to stabilize the economy have created asset bubbles, while the average American struggles with stagnant wages and rising costs. Trust in institutions, Congress, media, even the electoral system, has plummeted. Just as Rome debased its currency, America has been devaluing its social and financial capital. And just like Britain after WW, America has become entangled in conflicts and obligations that no longer serve its interests. You might think, but the US still leads the world in innovation and military power. That's true. Rome still had strong legions in its final century. Britain still had a navy during its decline. The power doesn't vanish. It just becomes insufficient to hold the system together. So where are we now in the four-stage model? Most historians and economists would say we're in stage 4, the fallout. We're witnessing not a dramatic collapse, but a slow-motion decline. Civil discourse is breaking down. Political polarization is at an all-time high. Economic productivity is no longer translating into widespread prosperity. And global confidence in the US is waning. The rise of China, BRICS alliances, and the push for de-dollarization are symptoms of a shifting world order. Just as the US displaced Britain, new powers are beginning to contest American primacy. History shows that this phase can last decades, but it's rarely reversed without major internal reform or external shock. There are striking data points. In 1960, manufacturing made up 25% of US GDP. Today, it's less than 11%. The top 10% of Americans now own nearly 70% of all wealth. Trust in government is at its lowest since records began, just 20%, compared to over 70% in the 1960s. Life expectancy in the US is declining, a rare trend in developed nations. These aren't isolated facts. They're the signs of institutional decay, not collapse, but erosion. Not sudden, but steady. And yet, there is one difference that could alter the trajectory. America, unlike Rome or Britain, is still young in many ways. It has the tools, demographics, resources, technology, to reinvent itself. But the window for that reinvention is closing. So what can we learn from this? First takeaway. Empires fall not from external enemies, but from internal contradictions. Overexpansion, debt, inequality, and institutional distrust are the real killers. Watch those metrics more than headlines. Second takeaway. Decline is gradual until it isn't. The Roman Empire didn't realize it had fallen until centuries later. The British thought they could manage decline gracefully. Both were wrong. Change is always faster than it feels in real time. Third takeaway. The future is not set. America has declined before. The Civil War, the Great Depression, the 1970s stagflation, but rebounded. What made the difference then was leadership, sacrifice, and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths. So here's the warning. If current trends continue, the US could follow the same arc as Rome and Britain. Not because it must, but because it refuses to recognize the signs. If we ignore the pattern, we become the pattern. The question isn't whether empires fall. They all do. The real question is, can an empire learn from its past in time to change its future? If this made you think differently, if you saw patterns you hadn't seen before, share this video. Leave a comment below. Do you think the US is declining or evolving? And if you want more in-depth breakdowns like this one, don't forget to subscribe. Because understanding history isn't about nostalgia, it's about survival.